Hi there, my name is Belle Sarin, and currently I am a fourth year student studying computer science at Azusa Pacific University in Azusa, California. And today I'm going to be walking you through how to set up a React Native development environment using the Expo plus React Native toolkit. And this will include some installs like VS Code, NPM, Node, etc. And after that, I'll show you how to set up your very first project and walk you through some really simple code just to kind of get the ball rolling for you. And I'll also take some time to explain some of the files we'll be coming across, just so you get a better understanding of what's going on in your app and how to interact with them best. And the equipment that I will be using is a Windows 10 PC and an iPhone 11. So let's get started. We're going to open Google real quick. And the first thing you're going to do is just actually look up Expo. So again, like I explained, Expo kind of provides a really simple set of instructions for how to set up your environment. So you're going to go to the very first link, which is expo.io, and this is the page you're going to come to. And as you can see, they have a ton of really helpful resources, and you can even create an account with them, which we'll have to do eventually. But for right now, if you want to read the documentation, you can, but let's just go to Get Started. And this Get Started page provides these 6 really simple steps for you to get started really quickly, starting to create apps and use Expo. And so the first step, as you can see, you can just kind of click on the link and it'll show you how React Native functions in an Expo development environment. And it shows you through this little web GUI development environment, and you can run it and save, and you can do like simple coding here. My internet's really slow. But if you want to do that, you can. We're not going to do that. We are going to skip to step 2 because we're going to set up the full thing ourselves. We're already sold on Node or on Expo. So first thing you're going to do is just click on the download for Node. And so you're going to come across 2 different options for Node download. And it knows that I'm on a Windows computer, so if you're on a Mac, then you're going to have to change what operating system you're downloading for. But basically, Node has a lot of perks, and some of them include the fact that it's a really simple server environment that is used for JavaScript, and it executes outside of the web browser. And basically, it's a really wonderful multi-platform server, so it can work on Windows, Mac, Linux, etc. And it's memory efficient because it has asynchronous programming. And so, as I said, it provides 2 different links for downloads. There's the beta version, which I'm hovering over here, and there's the more simple, reliable, basic version right here on the left. So I'm going to suggest you download the one on the left, actually. So only because I've run into some problems with the beta version. Because not all the bugs have been vetted out. So you're going to click on this, and then you're going to save that file, and you're going to open your downloads, which I've already gone to myself, but if you need help, there's downloads. And as you can see, now Node was downloaded today. Double click that, and so unfortunately I can't walk you through all of the setup for Node because I've actually already downloaded it. All this is already set up on here. That's why I'm making this video. But that's really not a problem because for everything you're going to be downloading for Node, all of the default options that are on the installs, you can just leave alone. Just click, next, and then let it install and finish. Because there's nothing really special you need to do other than the default options that they give you. And for the default options, if you want to change them, you can, but I would just recommend leaving them alone because it's really not going to make too much of a difference in our case. So great, we have Node. Wonderful. Now, going back to this Expo page, as you can see, after Node, it just kind of skips right to starting in the command line, setting up NPM. But we're going to add in a few more steps right between 2 and 3 here. And that's to download some optional things. Now, again, these are optional, not required for a React Native development environment, but I think they're really helpful for some of the NPM packages you're going to come across and also just for making any development environment. Some of these tools are really going to be helpful in any project you do, particularly this one. So the first thing you're going to do for our optional setup is to download Git. So Git, the reason, not GitHub, just Git. The reason that we're downloading Git is because basically it's really helpful with some of the NPM packages that you're going to be working with potentially, and it's required, so if you don't have them, they won't work. So it's always just good to have, and you can never go wrong downloading Git. So on this home page, you're just going to click Downloads, and then you're going to select your operating system. So I'm on Windows, and then it's going to show you with the installer, the exe, and you're going to save that. And then you can go ahead and just run that download. There's nothing really stopping you there. So it showed up on my other screen. Click Next, Next. And then I already have it, so again, it's just asking me if I want to do it again. Install the Git GUI. Again, just all of the default, literally everything default. For all the installs we're doing default. Unless you want to change like the folder that it's being installed in, go for it. But otherwise, I'm just going to stick with all the defaults, just to simplify things. So while that's downloading, we're going to go back to Google. And now there's, let's see, three more things that we're going to be downloading. And so the steps for this one are a little complicated. First, I'm going to show you Gennymotion, just because I think that'll help me explain better why you're downloading it along with other things. So let's go to Gennymotion. So what you're going to search is Gennymotion with a G. And emotion. And as you can see, I've already searched it before, but you're actually going to search Gennymotion free. Because if you search just Gennymotion, you'll have to pay for it, and we're not into that today. So what we're looking for is Gennymotion for personal use. And this just gives you like a few VMs you can play with. And basically what Gennymotion is that it is a VM or a virtual machine that is provided by Gennymotion, and you can do it for any sort of device you want. In our case, we're going to be simulating an Android app or an Android development environment, and through that we're going to install Expo on that, or we're going to use Expo on that Android simulation and be able to run our app on our computer through the VM through Gennymotion. So I'll explain that at the very end of the video. Again, this is optional. This is not my preferred way of developing with React Native. I actually prefer having the Expo app on my phone and scanning the QR code that comes with every time you run an Expo app. But this is just a good option. Say you don't have a phone that supports Expo apps, or I know some of my friends don't. They have Android phones, and it was just easier to like do it on the computer. That way they could see things really quickly and not have to look over to their phone or use up their phone battery. So anyway, personal preference, but we're going to do it just for the sake of showing you the various options that you have. So once you click the download, as I did here, so for personal use only, so no enterprise use. So we're going to do download Gennymotion Personal Edition. And what it's going to come up with is two options. So there's download with VirtualBox or without VirtualBox. I am going to choose without VirtualBox, only because I've run into some problems with dependencies and like packages and stuff with doing with VirtualBox. So what I'm going to do is just click download without VirtualBox, and then it's going to save it, and it's going to try to make you pay, but you don't have to pay. And what you're going to do now is just search, here, I'll go over here because it's a little crazy there. We're going to search VirtualBox separately. And so we're just going to do that separate rather than have to do both, at the same time. And then you're going to be choosing what host you're going to be doing. But actually, before you download this, you don't actually want the latest version of VirtualBox. And this is because when I ran Gennymotion recently, I found that you cannot run Gennymotion with the latest version of VirtualBox. So you need to do a later build of VirtualBox, which is, rather than 6.1, which is the newest version, we're going to be running 6.0. And then it says that it will stop being supported July 2020. That hasn't happened to me. It's currently mid-August of 2020. So you're going to do VirtualBox 6.0.24, or like literally any of these. The one that I actually have on my computer is 6.0.4. So let's just stick with that. So again, let me help you see this again. So we're going to search VirtualBox, go to the very first link, and then you, instead of clicking this big blue button that says download it, you don't want 6.1. We're going to go to downloads, and then there's so much text here, very bad, but we're going to go to these first 4 lines, and on the third line it says, if you're looking for the latest VirtualBox 6.0 packages, see VirtualBox 6.0 builds. So we're going to click this handy dandy link right there, and then I'm not actually sure which of these you can download that will be supported by Gennymotion, but I just recommend, since I know for sure and I vetted it, that 6.0.4 works. I would just go with that. Just, you know, you can try it if you want, but for sure I know this works. So you're going to save that file, and then we already saved Gennymotion. So let's go back to our Git download. We don't want to be sure we can download the Git bash. We don't really need to. Yeah, we didn't need to do that. Anyway, so Git is downloaded. Yay! Now, so Git's downloaded now, and also Node is downloaded, right? So if you haven't completed all your Node installed and set up, you can do that right now. But next we're going to do Gennymotion and VirtualBox. Now, a note here, before you go and start downloading either one of them, please install VirtualBox first. It's really important because as the two kind of mix together, and like, well, I'm not really sure why, honestly, but I found that you have to, because of some of the packages and dependencies that Gennymotion has on VirtualBox. If you install Gennymotion first without VirtualBox being there, it's going to get real confused, and like, Gennymotion is dependent on VirtualBox, but VirtualBox isn't dependent on Gennymotion, if that makes sense. So, VirtualBox 6.0.4 for me. Next, install. Bam. So, we'll let that install. So this is Gennymotion. We're going to choose English because I speak English. Bring this up here, create a shortcut, install, let it go for it. So Gennymotion finally started up and it's downloaded and everything is all good. So again, you want to make sure to download VirtualBox before you install Gennymotion, because Gennymotion relies on VirtualBox to be downloaded and set up. So here's my Gennymotion. As you can see, I've done this before. I already had it downloaded on my computer, but here is a device I've done before, but we'll go through that later. So now, let's see. We have one more install that we need to do, which is Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio Code is basically a really wonderful IDE that you can set up to code in, and I prefer it. I just think it's really simple, nice, easy to use. So we're gonna just look up Visual Studio. Visual Studio Code, and we're gonna go, you can go either to the quick link, which is right here, or you could just go to the home link and then download the stable build. You can do choose your OS, click download, and it's going to download, save file. And again, for setting up VS Code, you're just going to use all of the default setup, all the default installers, because we're not doing anything super fancy. So let's close all of these guys. So, okay, just to recap, we installed Node as part of the Expo setup. We also installed Gennymotion, Git, VirtualBox, and VS Code. And you can run VS Code setup right now. And then it says that one's already running because I actually have it open right here, haha. But if you haven't, just go through all the basic installs and you'll have it perfectly set up. So now let's go on to the next setup of our installations, which is just to actually, before we get to starting to install npm, let's just check that everything is actually installed. So I just opened a command prompt, and what we're going to do is type in node -- version. And as you can see, I have version 13.0.1, and that means that it successfully installed. And then we're going to do git -- version. So we know git's installed. We're going to do npm -dev version. And so that means that npm is installed, which is great. npm is the installer that comes with Node, and it's a really helpful resource for downloading libraries, packages, etc. So yeah, let me close this. So now that we have that in, now is the time to actually just install Expo itself, or the Expo client. And this is basically the thing that connects Node npm with the Expo development environment. And it makes it so that you can run the app on your phone, you can run it in that Android simulator in Gennymotion, you can run it just basically hosted by Expo. So the command that you're going to do is npm install expo -cli -- global. And the reason that we did global is just because that way you can access the command in any folder, not just one that you're installing it in right now. So right now I'm installing it in my user/bell folder in my computer, but -global makes it accessible anywhere in your computer. So we'll wait for that to download. Alright, so looks like everything downloaded. As you can tell, that took quite a while. Lots of things to install, but it's great. Doesn't look like there are any errors. Looks beautiful. So we're going to check that it installed correctly. So we're going to do expo --- version. Oh no. Okay, so it looks like everything installed successfully. You'll see that I went on with the video and tried to explain how to check that Expo is installed, but I ran into this little error, which is kind of funny. So I just went ahead and reinstalled uninstalled Node and then reinstalled it, because apparently the version of Node that I had was not supported, and I don't remember updating Node to 13.0.1. But if you run into this error also, here's a little guide for how to read this error. Just look at what versions are supported. So Expo only supports versions that are greater than or equal to 10.13 but less than 11, greater than 12.13, less than 13, etc., etc. So important. But now that that's all over with, let's check that Expo is indeed installed. So expo -- version, there it is, beautiful as can be. And so now, you successfully installed all of Expo's requirements. So we'll go back to these, and you're going to see that you did all the first 3 steps. Good job. Now, what we're going to do is actually create our very first project. So I'm going to walk you through some of the very basic setup, and we'll get going with that. So first of all, what you want to do is that you want to actually go to your C drive. So we're going to do cd -- and basically that means change directory, and then -- means back one. cd -- again. So now you're just in your basic C drive, and if you're a visual person like me, what's really helpful is just to go to here, and you can even look at the path up here. This is where we are in the command line right now, right here. Now, typically I create, or what you're going to do is create a new directory. So what you're going to do is, or a new folder. So actually, let's just go back here and do it manual because, yeah. So what you're going to do is you're going to create a new folder. You can call it repos, which is what I did above, and then I also have repos fall 2020, which is what I was using earlier to kind of do some testing on. But you can call it whatever you want. Repos is great. I'm kind of call it repos test. But call it whatever you want. So we're going to go back to the command line and go cd or change directory repos test. And now we're in repos test. Wonderful. And now you can do the command directory or dir, and you're going to see that this thing is completely empty. There's nothing in here. We can go back in here, see it for ourselves with our own eyes. Nothing in here. So what we're going to do in this repos _ test or repos, whatever you've called it, is that we're going to create our very first project. And the way you do that is just by running very, very few lines of code. So first one is going to be Expo init, and then we're going to call it DemoProject. And now basically it's going to run you through, almost like earlier, all the default installs. So I'm going to follow also all the default installs as well. So, with your arrows you can click all the different options, but we're just going to go with blank, minimal app as clean as an empty canvas. That's what they say. And then looks like it's installing Yarn for you, which is nice. In the past they would ask whether they wanted them to install it or not. So yeah, we'll just let that download. Wonderful. Alright, so it looks like everything installed okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cd into that demo project folder. So you're going to do cd demo project, and now we're in the demo project folder. So if you want to go back to this, now as you can see, demo project has popped up in here, and this just installed a ton of folders. Node modules, Expo, assets, these are just some of the things you're going to see, and we'll become a little bit more familiar with them in the future, but I'll give you a little hint here that app, this JS file, is the one that you're mainly going to be using today, or it's basically all you're going to be using today, but I'll walk you through some of the other folders and such that you're going to have. So here we are, demo project. Before we actually start the application, let's install npm just for safe measure, or for good measure. It's a really important thing. You're going to have to do it anyway, and I believe you actually have to do it before you run Expo anyway. Here, let me try Expo start. Oh, never mind. You don't need to do it. We'll do it later. So this just popped up for me. So automatically when you run Expo start, it's going to just automatically start up or open this web GUI, and it's going to be hosted at 19002, a local host. And so this is the basic web GUI, and if you're going to run it on Gennymotion, you click this. If you have the web browser thing installed, you can do this. I've never been able to successfully make it work, but it's a thing. And there's just all these different things, and the main thing that we're going to be using today is this QR code that pops up here, but we'll do that in a little bit. First, here I'll explain this to connection. So there's tunnel, LAN, and local. So LAN is if you are on the same network, so say you're running it on your phone and your computer and they're both connected to the same Wi-Fi, you can do that. Tunnel is say like you're outside in the middle of a park and or something. I don't know why you'd be doing this, but basically your phone is connected to say LTE, and your laptop's connected to like the library's Wi-Fi. So that would be a situation in which you use tunnel. But I'm connected at home to my Wi-Fi both on my phone and on my computer. So that's that. So now we're going to go to Visual Studio's code. So as you can see, I already have an app open, or some coding open here. But what we're going to do is just open a new window for Visual Studios. And this is what popped up for me, which is beautiful. So I'm going to update it later. Basically, when you open Visual Studio Code, it's going to open you to just this basic kind of dashboard page. Lets you add some languages. So if you wanted to, like I added Python the other day, you can change the color. So I have it in dark mode. It might be installed as light for you. I'm not really sure. So you have several options over here, and this also shows recent projects you've worked on. What I'm going to open today is you're going to open folder. So before I show you this is like your main navigation. So if you need to search all the folders that are nested inside of the main folder that you're open, you can use this. If you have GitHub installed, you can do this. You can debug. This is for adding like extensions and things like that. So if you want to install Java, I don't actually know what that is, but we're going to ignore that. What we're going to do is we're going to click the two little stacked pages there. We're going to click open file. And so as you can see, I have mine connected to my GitHub. And these are all the projects in my GitHub. But what we're going to do instead is just go to this VC, your Windows C folder, and then you're going to open your repos, and then you're just going to click once on your demo project. You're going to push select folder. And what that does there is basically it uses that folder as like the base, and every folder inside of it will now be listed on the side here. So that's really helpful just for like simplifying your life and being able to view exactly what you're working with right now rather than like every file that's in your computer. And as I explained earlier, what we're mainly going to be working with is this app.js file. So by default, this is what comes up for the app. And now, before we get started with anything, I'm going to show you how to connect with, in my case, an iPhone. How to connect your iPhone to Expo so that you can start using the app. Okay, hello again. So now we are on my iPhone 11 right now. And as you can see, just here's my home screen. And what we're going to do to download Expo for this iPhone is we're going to go to the App Store. We're going to click search and then Expo. And as you can see, I've downloaded it before, so we're going to download that. Pretty quick, easy, light download. There it is. So let's move that to the home screen. So now you're just going to click on the Expo app, and as you can see, it's actually already down in signed in as me. So if I were to sign in, you can either sign up right now. So this is how, as I mentioned earlier, you would sign up for an account. But basically, in this instance, I'm just going to sign in myself. Wonderful. All right, so here it is. So there isn't too much to navigate here. So this will show what you've recently developed under recently developed, and then recently opened, and then this will just show you if your audio is working, geofencing. You can maybe let permissions access your location. So if app needs your location, again, so you can either allow or deny if your app needs to access your audio. Things like that. And then this is just your profile options here. You can set to light, automatic. Shake device is a really helpful tool that I utilize quite a lot. So one way sometimes if you need to manually refresh your app is that you do shake device, where basically you take your phone and you just shake it in your hand left and right, and it will come up with a little slide up screen or a slide up menu that gives you options to restart your app, etc. But yeah, here's the basic functionality of Expo app. All right, so as I just showed you, that's how you download the Expo app. Now I'm going to show you how to interact with your app that's running on your PC with your phone. So what I'm going to do is, as you can see on the phone right now, I'm on the Expo app. What I'm actually going to do is go to the camera app, and as you can see, this is my desk. What I'm going to do is just simply scan this QR code, and it's going to come up with a pop-up notification on the top, and we'll let it load, which can sometimes take a little bit. And as you can see on the computer, it shows live the fact that the JavaScript bundle is loading. Cool. So it's giving you a little high five there for starting your first app. And here we go. So this is your app. As simple as it may be, right now it's just a white screen with text. This is what we're working with. All right, so now that we have the app up and running, first of all, let me walk you through a couple of the files that you're going to find in here. So on the left, you'll see this little menu where it shows all the files within your demo project. And one of them is node modules. And node mods is actually what's downloaded or installed when you do npm I or npm install. So a way to bring up the command line in here is you go control backtick, and then you can bring up the little terminal that is inside of VS Code, which is really nice. So the command we did earlier was npm install, or I, you can do the same thing for short, it does the same thing. And basically that installs all of these different files that you can use for different things, and it includes some libraries for Expo, like @expo and things like that, and we'll be using this one actually later on. And if you really want to, you can like go in and look at all the files, and like at times you're gonna have to go in and edit them. I ran into a ton of issues this semester, sometimes needing to just edit like the Expo file, or there's one called like app default or something like that. So at some point you're going to have to unfortunately navigate these files, which eventually you'll master it, I promise you. And then here's Git, and then here's app. This is the JSON file. So it's basically telling Expo like what version you're doing, and then the name of the project, and then it's telling you where to get certain icons and like images and things like that. And then Our main file that we talked about earlier is that we're going to be using app.js, and this is where we're going to be putting all of our code today. There's also package.json, which installs all of the React Native packages, the Expo, the developer things, and then the scripts. And it tells you for Android, iOS, web, etc. And then the package lock.json. This also installs some dependencies, things from Babel, and a bunch of other things. You don't really need to go into that. And then yarn, this is just for debugging, basically. It helps it's almost like a grammar check, but for code. I don't know how to explain that. There's a word for it. But anyway, let's get started with actually coding. So here we are. We have our app running, and it says just open up app.json to start working on your app, which we've done. So let's get started by first of all, we're actually going to change some of the structure of this code right off the bat. Because we, as programmers, or at least for me, I prefer to program in an object-oriented sort of way, rather than using a bunch of functions and a main and things like that. So we're going to change the structure first to be a class rather than a function. So you see here that it's a function at this point. Let's change this to be a class. So the way that we do this is that we'd replace the word function with class. It's lowercase. And then you're going to see some red squiggles. That's okay, don't worry. And then you're going to take away the parentheses after app and then write extends react.component. Is that how you spell component? And okay. I'm not the best at spelling. Okay, and then what we're going to do after that is we're going to put in a render, the word render, and then open close parentheses, and then open curly brace, and you're going to take the closing curly brace, you're going to cut that, and then you're going to put it right under this return statement's closing parentheses, and there you go. So let's go ahead and indent all of these things for clarity's sake. And I re-rendered my app, and you're going to see that nothing's changed. It's just now it's a class rather than a function, and that's kind of what we want to do. So let's get started in actually adding or changing the app. Let's change this text first to say press button 4. And I'll tell you why we're going to do that later, but you'll see it. So right now it just says press button 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a touchable opacity. So touchable opacity basically is like a wrapper that you can put around any text, any shape, anything, and make it like an interactive button on your app. There is a button component that you can install. So up here, what we're going to do before we use touchable opacity is we have to import it. So we're going to type touchable opacity. And another one you could do if you really wanted is button. That's another default React Native installed library or component. But we're just going to use touchable opacity. I'll leave it there so that way you have an option. But around this text, we're going to insert a touchable opacity. So let's do open bracket and then touchable opacity, close it, and then what you're going to do is take that, you're going to put it down here. So that wraps around the text. You're going to indent it, save. And now, if you look, the app doesn't look actually any different. However, if you were to press on app now, you're going to see that it's interactable. So now the touchable opacity has made the text itself a button, which is pretty fun. Now, let's go ahead and actually style this button. So we're going to actually have the premise of the app that we're going to make today is it has no purpose, but it's just to show you some basic functionalities of React Native, and we're going to create a big button. So let's go ahead and style it. And the way that we do that is we go down here, and you can see that a style sheet has been created. And this is basically like CSS code that's inputted into this JavaScript React Native sort of thing. And so you've named or you've made it constant and you called it styles. So this is all the styles that you're going to be using. And you see this is how you would use it in any sort of way. So you could put, so you're going to format every time that you implement a style, you're going to format it like this. But you might change this name depending on which one you're using. So let's do a new line here, and we're going to say button styles. And you want to make sure that there is a comma right here. So every time you add a new style, you're going to have to make sure that there's a comma. Common mistake when I started coding with React Natives, I always forgot commas. You get over it eventually. So let's name the style of this big button container. And then you'll do a colon and then curly brace, and there we go. We've created a new one. Press save, nothing happens, we haven't implemented it yet. So let's make the height of this button 300. Let's make the width also 300. Let's make the background color. For color wise, you can use hex, which you can see they used here for white, but the React Native also has like default colors that are predefined in the library. So they have like a hex that are associated with a name. So if you're to put in quotes red and you save that, there are no problems with that because red is defined somewhere in the library as a certain hex. So let's just leave it at that at this point. Let's go up to our touchable opacity, and right here we're going to say style equals curly brace styles dot big button container. Save that, and there you go. On your screen, a big, huge square button has been put, and you have your small text that's in the upper left corner, and it looks pretty gross, but it is what it is at this point. But let's go ahead and keep styling to make it exactly the way we want it. So what I'm going to do next is show you how to do placement formatting. So I'm going to actually take you to a web page that is extremely helpful for me with understanding how Flexbox and layout works in React Native. So React Native had in their docs, reactnative.dev/docs/flexbox has this amazing basically walkthrough of what each of their layout options do. So the first one is flex, and basically flex is an integer that you put in, and no matter how many times I read this, I still don't really understand what it does, and every time I use it, it doesn't do anything. Flex 1 does things, but every time I do anything else, it doesn't. So I don't use flex too often. I use flex 1 a lot, I'll say that. But other than that, I don't use it that much. And then flex direction, this is extremely helpful. So it tells you like how, if you want it to be a column, if you want it to be like a reverse column, and then layout, and then justify content, extremely helpful because I use justify content to do center a whole lot. You can do start, flex end, space between is really good. And then align items. This is really important for also doing, let's see, like for the center. So this is how you do horizontal alignment in the center, and then justify content would be vertical alignment in the center. And then there's also align self, which does some things, content, flex wrap, all these things. So I'll leave a link to this in the bottom description. That way you can check it out and kind of learn about what it does. So we're going to add a couple of layout components to this. So let's add a justify content, and we'll say center. And again, if you'll remember, so that's the, what was it? I think the vertical alignment in the center. Anyway, we'll see. And so we can say that, yeah. So it's the vertical alignment in the center. So now let's add align items, which will be center. and that puts it horizontally in the center. And then let's just add a margin to the top, let's add a margin to the top because later on we're going to need that just for formatting. And we'll add 500. So that puts it at the bottom of the screen. You'll see why we did that in a little bit. And you can look up all of the like margin versus padding if you're not familiar with CSS. There are documentations online that kind of go into detail about what each of those things do and why they're important. So let's go ahead and save that. Perfect. And now let's edit the style of the text because the text isn't looking too great, right? It's kind of hard to see. It's black and small. So let's do big button text. Let's name that as a new style component, and we're going to say font size, and we'll set that to 40. And then we'll change the color. Now we could either, color. We could either type the word out white, or we can do the hex, which is again FFF. And that hasn't done anything yet because we need to implement it. So we're going to say style equals curly brace styles dot big button text. Save that, and you'll see that it's big old button text. Perfect. So now that we have our big button, perhaps we want it to do something, right? So let's have it send out an alert every time the button is pressed. So we'll go ahead and go to right above the render. So let's add a couple new lines just so that we have some space. And let's say, let's make a new, what do you call it? I guess it would be function. And we'll call it on press, on button press. Perfect. Now we're going to do curly brace, and inside of that we'll say let's say alert. Let's import alert first, because in order to implement alert you have to import it from React Native's library. So we'll import alert, and let's say alert.alert, and then we'll say button pressed. So if you were to click the button right now, nothing's happened, right? So now let's implement it by actually putting it into our button. So let's say on press equals, and then we have to say this because it's part of the state, dot on button press. And then we're going to do bind because it binds it to the state, and then we'll put this inside. Yay! Button is pressed. So every time now you press the button, it'll say, hey, you pressed the button, great job. So another thing we can do with implementing a button press is that we can add a console.log. And a console.log is basically when the whatever text you console.log, it will be printed out to the console. So you'll see right here the console, it'll come out here. So something you can do is that within the render you can do a console.log to ensure that the app is running. You can say app running, and every time you save it will be printed out here. This is from earlier when I was testing it out, ignore that. And then in here you can also do console.log and say you pressed the button. Save that. And if you were to press the button and then go back, and then it'll say your app is running because you just refreshed it, and then it'll say you press the button. So another thing that I'm going to show you is how to use icons. Now I find like icons are always extremely helpful to use. They just add so much style and kind of clarity to any app. So let's go ahead and add material icons from one of our actually node modules folders. So I'm going to actually show you where it is, only because it's like towards the top and I don't have to scroll for an eternity. But here is the @Expo folder, and within @Expo there are actually vector icons that you can that are there already for you to use, and they have different ones that you can use, and like you can look inside of them and it'll show you let's see, it'll show you different ones that they basically import from other files and like all these different things. I don't know, it's cool. So like here's some examples that you can look at of like the names. The one that I'm going to use today is face, so it's just going to show you a face icon. So right below your button here, we're going to put a new icon. And the way we do this is before we can use it, we have to import it. So below your React Native import, we're going to say import, and then within curly brace, you're going to say material icons. And then outside the curly brace, you're going to say from quotes @Expo. So this is referring to the file / vector -icons. Perfect. You save that, nothing's happened yet because now we got to implement it. So what we're going to do is within brackets, we're going to say material icons, and you're going to so you're not going to have an open and closing material icons bracket. You're just going to have one, and you're going to say within this one / and then closing bracket. And as you can see, it's invalid at this point because you haven't like defined anything about this material icon. Did I spell it right? That's why. Material icons. Oopsies. Material. Did I spell it right? There we go. So there's a little warning there saying that like you haven't really defined anything about your icon. Let me get rid of this. So let's use the icon face. So the way that you define which icon you want to use is you say name, and then in this case it'll be face. Let's set the size equal to, in curly brace, 90. And then you can add some style to it, equals, and then if you want to put, so you don't always have to create a style component within the style sheet down here. You can just put actually individual styles if like there's like one or two things that, you know, I could have done it for the text, but just for like clarity's sake, I put it down here. But let me show you how to do it within the actual brackets itself. So you do style, and then you do 2 curly braces within itself. And the way you do this is you just start putting in the components of the style. So color, and let's set it to, let me show you teal, because that is a way you can do things. And if you look on our screen, there's a little teal face on the very bottom. Let me take out this margin real quick. And the way that you quickly comment out things is you can do Control / and that'll just automatically comment things out. So now it's in the middle of our screen, and then the button is there, and the little icon below it is there, and that's really helpful. So lastly, what I'm going to show you is a little bit more complicated, but it is really cool because I think it's important to know how to do just like really basic libraries that you can import. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to create a flat list. But before we do that, we need to get some data in here. And the way that you structure data is you can either import it from another file, but in this case I'm just going to do everything in one file. So we're going to say const data. You can do capital, lowercase, but I'm going to do all caps. Lowercase, and then you're going to do just square brackets, new line, and then now you're going to start doing some curly braces. So I'm going to say first name, and let's say the first name's John. So I'm just adding a bunch of data of people's names. And then last name, and then John Doe. And then let's add another name, and we'll say first name. We'll have it be Mary. And then comma, last name, and we'll do Jane. So that's good enough for now. Just 2 names. You can add more if you like. But let's start creating a flat list. So something we want to do in this case is actually start interacting with the state itself. So you can see we already did this by using this, and this binds it to the state, but we haven't defined any actual variables within the state. So let's start doing that. So we're going to create a constructor, and we're going to say constructor, and then in parentheses props, there we go. And then we're going to do curly brace. We're going to say super props and if you want to read up on state in React Native, or if you're unfamiliar with what state is, I would do a little bit of research about how a life cycle works within any sort of application, and I think it'll add a ton of clarity to what's going on right here. Then we're going to say this.state equals curly brace, and we're going to define a couple variables within our state. So we're going to say first name, and we'll just set it as being 2 empty what are they called, quotes, and then last name, empty quotes, and then let's import the data into our state, and we'll say data is equal is data. Perfect. There we go. So we saved that. Nothing's happened, but now that's the data. So what we want to do now is create actually a flat list so that you can select the data and start assigning the data to the state. And the way that we do this, or you can do this in many ways, but we're going to be using a flat list today. And the way that we do this is we're going to use flat list and cards. So first of all, I have to import flat list. So flat list into React Native. And then I'm going to also import a library that I didn't before, which is called cards. And we're going to be doing that from a library from React Native Elements. So let's go ahead and open the terminal within VS Code. And we're going to type in the words npm, because we're using npm to install, and then React Native elements. You're going to press enter, and then it's going to do some installing, and you're going to see on the app that it's refreshing and doing its thing. And we'll let this install. It might take a little while. So it looks like there's a little problem here. So sometimes if there's a problem importing it, it might be because this is running in another folder, so or in the command line. So let's cancel this here. Let's stop running our app, and then let's try this again. npm I or install React native elements. There we go, much faster. There we go, successful. So it was just a problem because I was running it and also trying to install something. So let's go back and run the app again. And then I'm going to shake my phone. There we go. So we've imported React Native Elements now. And let's go ahead and import that at the top. So we're going to say import curly brace, and we're going to say card because that's the library that we're importing. And then we're going to say from, in quotes, React Native Elements. Perfect. So let's go ahead and start defining and making our flat list. So first of all, let's make a container for the flat lists, and we're going to make a style for that, and we're going to say, let's add a comment first and say flat list style, and we'll say center view as the view for it. Oops. Curly brace, and we'll say align items center, and maybe we'll give it a margin at the top, margin top, and we'll say 10. Now let's go up and create our view for it. So let's create a view. And now let's start creating the flat list. So this might get a little bit tricky because there's going to be a lot of code that I'm entering in here, but don't panic, just stick with me. Some things might disappear on the screen, but I promise it'll work. Just got to stick with it. So let's start by defining our flat list, and we'll say flat list, and then we're actually not going to have a closing bracket for this. We're just going to do that sort of thing. And you'll see that everything on the screen just moved up. And that's because the flat list has been added there, but you can't see it because there's nothing in the flat list. So let's go back and bring back that margin on the top so that way we can still at least see our button. But now we've inserted our flat list. And now within this, we're going to add a bunch of new lines. So this still counts even though there's a bunch of new lines here. And what we're going to do is say data equals, and then curly brace this dot state dot data. Now again, nothing's happened yet. I'm just going to get rid of that little yellow warning sign. And we're going to say num columns equals 1. And again, here, before we keep going, let me show you that you can look up this flat list component on React Native's documentation. So I have this up for myself already. And basically it gives you insight into like what sort of things, so like data, tells you how to use it, item separator, component, list empty, list footer component, like all these different things that you use within it. And we're going to be using one of these. So we'll get rid of that. Num columns 1, and then we're going to add render item. So this is the part that gets a little bit more tricky, so stick with me. We're you're going to have curly brace, parentheses, curly brace, and you're going to say item, and you're going to say row data. And row data is basically defining what like the variable is going to be as you're going through and creating this. So now you're going to do a fat arrow, then you're going to add another curly brace. Now let's add a bunch of new lines. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a return statement. We're going to say return, open parentheses, and now we're going to add the cards. So we're going to make each of the cards interactable, so you can, like, they're almost buttons. So we're going to say touchable opacity. We're going to add that, and then above that, or right here, we're going to add card. And this isn't going to have a closing bracket, it's just going to have the forward slash and then the closing brace, or the closing arrow. So now within card, let's say title equals row data dot first name. So again, we added first name up here in the state. And then we're going to do plus, and then to add a space there, and then a plus again, and then row data dot last name. So now if you look on the screen, these little cards or like little squares have actually been are popping up on the screen. You can't see anything in them yet. Oops. Title, sorry. There we go. Oh, there we go. Hey. So now our data is showing up, right? Yay, looks great. And so basically what this did is that you created the flat list, and now you're calling the data from the state because this is the data down here. And then you're saying how many columns you want, so you could even say like 2, and I believe that would create 2 columns. You could say 3, whatever, but let's stick with 1. And then you can say render items, and then item, and then row data, and then you're going to say touchable opacity so that each of these cards are interactable, and then title, first name, and then last name. So title is basically like what you want inside of each card, and then you can add like different things like descriptions. So let's go ahead and actually look up what the card is from React Native Elements. So all you have to do is go to Google, and you're going to say React Native Elements card. And then React Native Elements.github has all these different things, and basically it'll tell you like how to use it, and then image, feature, all these different things. So it gives you a little bit of insight into how to use it. So great documentation. And so let's leave it at that. There's like a bunch of styling you can do. So you can say like title style, and then you do equals, and then 2 curly braces inside each other, and you could say font size equals 15, and then it'll make it like smaller, and then you could say 30, make it real big, and then you can add like padding to the top, and then you can also change container style, and that would be equals 2 curly brace, and then you could say width is 200. That would just make them wider, and then like height is anyway, all these different things. I'm not gonna go through and do all of them, but just to let you know, those are options. You could change like color, border color, all these things. Yeah, but what I really want to get to is how to start interacting with these cards with when you press them. So what we're going to do is we're going to first of all create a new function or method called user selected. And then the way you do that is that you are going to have some props put through, and you're going to say parentheses F name, and then L name. And you're going to put arrow, curly brace, and then you're going to say this dot set state, and then you're going to say parentheses, curly brace, first name, so that's the state component or the state variable. You're going to set that to F name, and then last name, again a variable in the state, and you're going to set that to L name. So nothing's happening yet, but let's implement that into our flat list by going to the touchable opacity above the card, and we're going to say on press equals curly brace, open close parentheses, fat arrow, set state, on press, blah blah blah, fat arrow, this dot user selected, and then in parentheses row data dot first name, and then row data dot last name. So these warnings are going to keep popping up, just ignore them. So now we've set the state's variables to be the first name and the last name that you select from these cards. So let's go ahead and actually start implementing that in. So what you're going to do is that right below this text in your big button, you're going to say text, and then within that you're going to put in curly brace this dot state dot first name, close that, and then another one, this dot state dot last name, close that. And so now a new text component has been added to the button, and now when you press on either of the cards, the name is going to show up in the button, which I think is pretty cool. Let's add a small little styling so that the names are a little clearer to see. So let's go to the bottom, and then let's say big button small text. And let's make sure to add a comma there. Don't want to forget that. And then we're going to say text, I guess it's already aligned. Let's say color white. Oops. Color white. Oops. There we go. Color white, and then font size, let's set that to 20. 20. And then let's set font style, which I haven't shown you before. So font style, and then let's set that to italic. So let's go up and change the styling. So we'll go to text and we'll say style equals styles dot big button small text. So now if you click on either names, you'll see that now it looks a little bit nicer. Oh, and also the flat list is a scrollable thing, which is nice. Oops. And you can read all these warnings. It's probably something small. So it's just like warning that in the future the card title style will be removed. So it's a message from React Native Elements saying like, hey, in the future this like feature that you're using may not work anymore. So like be prepared that your code might be deprecated eventually. So that's good to know. I've been doing this for a while. So this is probably a little bit older. But yeah, I think that's all I'm going to show you. And also, you know, going back to our code here, you're going to see app is running, so the console is printing things. And if you go to the bottom, where are we? There we If you press the button is pressed. Alright, so there you go. This is our small little app. It doesn't do much, but I show you a little bit how to use the state, how to use some lifecycle functions, the alerts, console.log, show you how to use render, how to make a constructor. I hope this helps and that you're able to better understand how to use React Native in the future. And now I'm going to show you how to run this on Gennymotion. Alright, so with our app still running, it's no longer running on my phone, but now I'm going to show you how to run it on Gennymotion. So what you're going to do is you're going to go in and you're going to open Gennymotion. If you don't have it on your start menu, just look it up in your computer. You're going to open that. And so now it's going to boot up Gennymotion. And what you're going to need to do is sign in. So I'm going to sign in using my email. Alright, so you're going to sign in, you're going to enter all your credentials, and you're going to push next, and you're going to say personal use, and agree to all the terms and conditions, and here you go. So you can see I created a device in the past, and I'll just delete this and start over. But what you're going to do is you're going to click the Add Virtual Device in the top right corner. And there's so many options for different phones that you can use. There's like, you can make a custom phone, Google Nexus, there's different Samsung phones. But let's look up something a little more modern, like a Google Pixel. I'm not super familiar with Google Pixels, but let's just choose Google Pixel 3. It seems fine. Push next. And then you can change some of the processing speeds if you want to make it a little faster, a little more memory size. You can change the Android version. You can add some like custom display settings, things like that. But we're just going to go with the defaults and we're going to let it install. Alright, so now that it's installed, let's just go ahead and start the device. So now basically when it says starting virtual device, it's connecting to VirtualBox and it's starting to bring up the device and load all that it has to do in the virtual machine. Here we go, it starts loading, and as you can see, for personal use is in the bottom left, just so that you can't like, I don't know, it's like a little watermark. And there you go. So now you have your little Android machine and you can interact with it via your mouse. But let's go ahead and actually run our app on it. So what you're going to do is you're going to go back to your Expo in the browser. Where was it? Here it was. So Expo's running, and now you're going to say run on an Android device / emulator. And it says it's attempting to open the simulator. It's telling Expo on the device. Takes a little bit of time. And there we go. So after a little bit of debugging, it looked like I just needed to do an npm install again. But it looks like it's working, and you press the button and everything works, and that's how you set it up in Gennymotion. So in this video, we went over how to install Expo, React Native package, and how to set up a basic app, and I walked you through some of the NPM packages and how to install them, and did a really basic app about buttons and things like that. And I showed you how to install the Expo app on your iPhone, and then also how to use Gennymotion to do a simulation of your app live. And I'll leave a couple links below for documentation on the React Native website, some links that I referred to in the video. And then I'll put the time codes of where each of the sections are for your convenience. Thank you.